Hello, it's great to be back. Been a little while. I've had this kind of sporadic few days, and I'm back now to making videos hopefully every day. We're going to talk today about the controversy with Jesus' age when he was crucified. Turns out that Irenaeus actually thought Jesus was around 50, which is very interesting because Irenaeus is one of the first real church fathers to give us detailed accounts of Jesus. He writes quite a few books in the later part of the 2nd century. He's one of the first real historians to lay out what Christianity is, and he's the first to give us 4 Gospels. Remember the canonical edition of the 4 Gospels, as well as 14 epistles now. That's 4 more than the 10 Marcion gives us, according to church fathers. So Luke says he was but a little more than 30 years old. Mark also gives around the 30-year mark, I think, as well. John, however, indicates that he was nearly 50 in a controversy. I'm reading here from a book called The Christ. It's a brilliant book by a guy called John Remsburg. He wrote this in 1909, and it's one of the first really detailed atheistic works. Really good, stands up to this day. I'm just going to read. He was an American, but writing over 100 years ago, and he did a really good job with this book, and I refer to it actually quite often. He was a very good writer as well, quite persuasive. So, in a controversy with Jews during his ministry, John says, "Your father Abraham rejoiced to see my day, and he saw and was glad." Jesus is talking here through John. "Then said the Jews unto him, Thou art not yet 50 years old, and hast thou seen Abraham?" That's John 8:56 and 57. This implies he was nearly 50 at the time. Discussing the question of Jesus' age, St. Irenaeus, the most renowned of the early church fathers and the founder of the New Testament canon, who lived in these century immediately following Jesus, says, "He, Christ, came to save all through means of himself. All I say, who through him are born again to God, infants and children and boys and youths and old men. He therefore passed through every age, becoming an infant for infants, thus sanctifying infants, a child for children, thus sanctifying those who are of this age, being at the same time made to them an example of piety, righteousness, and submission. A youth for youths, becoming an example of to youths, and thus sanctifying them for the Lord. So likewise he was an old man for old men, that he might be a perfect master for all, not merely as respects the setting forth of the truth, but also as regards age, sanctifying at the same time the aged also." Okay, and becoming an example to them likewise. Then at last he came on to death itself, that he might be the firstborn from the dead, that in all things he might have preeminence, the Prince of Life, existing before and going, blah, blah, blah. This is from Against Heresies, Book 4, Chapter 22, Section 4. Just a little caveat towards the end here. He's talking about the firstborn, the first risen. He should remember that in the Old Testament there are resurrections. I think I've already gone through this. And also, he raises 3 people from the dead. What's the firstborn and first fruits born and stuff like the first and last of everything actually refers probably to the time in the epistle writers and the early Christians who were saying that Jesus is the firstborn, resurrected before time began. And in Revelation we get a resonance with this. In Revelation 13, just to say, and I have been through this in other videos, he is the lamb slain before creation. That's an early Christian cosmological point. So Irenaeus here is actually saying more or less that Jesus, and this is what he believed, that Jesus is actually about 50 when he died. So why the gospel saying 30 or roughly 30, and then Irenaeus is coming along and saying no, it's 50. And John is also, remember, John is off from the synoptics. It conveys essentially a kind of different tradition. So Irenaeus here is actually going with John, which is quite interesting. Besides this, I'm quoting again, Irenaeus says, besides this, those very Jews who thus disputed with the Lord Jesus Christ have most closely indicated the same thing. For when the Lord said to them, your father Abraham rejoiced to see my day, and he saw it and was glad, they answered him, thou art not yet 50 years old. Hast thou seen Abraham? So they're just saying, why would you say you're not yet 50 if you're not yet 30 or in your 30s? Wouldn't they say you're not yet 40 or something like that? Nor did, I'm reading again from the book, The Christ, nor did Irenaeus depend upon the fourth gospel alone for his authority. He was the companion of the age. I'm not actually I won't repeat that. I actually have a problem with John Remsburg's, and it's kind of fair, but also there's not very much evidence here that Irenaeus did much rather than just see Polycarp when he was young. He's really sketchy on this point. And I think the people Christians will always try and link Polycarp to John, but he never really says anything specifically, first of all, about the apostle being John, only that he talked with apostles who were from Ephesus, where a John ended up going to, and also that John was even John the disciple, because other early Christians thought that John the elder was actually a different John, and the John of Revelation, according to some Christians in certain Christian traditions. John the presbyter being different from John the disciple, and separated by quite a few years, honestly. I'll just finish up here in regards to this testimony of the divine Irenaeus, as he is called. Godfrey Higgins says the church has been guilty of the oversight of letting this passage from Irenaeus escape. One of the earliest, most respected and most quoted of its ancient bishops, saints and martyrs tells us in distinct words that Jesus was not crucified under Herod or Pontius Pilate, but that he lived to be turned over 50 years old of age. This he tells us on the authority of his master, St. Polycarp, also a martyr, who had it from St. John himself and from all the old people in Asia. Now, I might be able to pull up very quickly this quote, because I think it is quite interesting. I don't actually have it in front of me, unfortunately, but he basically says all that Irenaeus says is that he doesn't mention John. He only mentions the place that John heralded from, and then apostles. Now, apostles can mean any number of things to the early church fathers. Paul recognizes many apostles, but only ever mentions 3 of the disciples, and he never calls them disciples. So there might be actually a miscommunication being passed through the decades here. There is definitely embellishment going on, because Eusebius recounts a letter that's now looks a little bit suspect, and Eusebius tells his own readers that embellishment is okay in the church. Essentially, a few times you leave out things that are embarrassing to the church, and you can, maybe you help to express things in a certain way to benefit the church. All this will be conveyed when I do separate videos on these fathers, because it's really interesting actually seeing what they say. But St. John, whoever this John was, and he may well have been a different John. Johannan was a pretty popular name, and it's really fairly well understood. And Papias says, and he conflates John the presbyter, the elder, with, he actually makes the distinction, I think, between him and John the disciple. And Eusebius also says that they are different people. So who's Irenaeus talking about here? Well, we're not really sure. He only says that he saw him, and you can read this in 334 of Irenaeus's work here. I think I've got it just here. I'm trying to find it quickly for you. Yeah, here it is. So this is what Irenaeus actually says. But Polycarp also was not only instructed by apostles, not John, and conversed with many whom had seen Christ, but was also by apostles in Asia appointed bishop of the church in Smyrna, who I also saw in my early youth, for he tarried on earth a very long time, and when a very old man, gloriously and most nobly suffering martyrdom, departed this life, having always taught the things which he had learned from the apostles, and which the church had handed down, and which alone are true. So this is Irenaeus against heresies 3-4. I'm going to talk about this actually. And I keep on noticing and then forgetting about these things. Is he talking about apostles here that he saw in his youth, or is he talking about John? Because in this whole passage, he actually doesn't mention John. He never says that. He talks about being only instructed by apostles and conversed with many who had seen Christ. But what does that mean? Because many apostles had seen Christ. Okay, he might be it's so interesting seeing this. He might be taking traditions from people who had seen Christ, just as Paul had seen Christ, just as many of his apostles had seen Christ in mystical revelation. He talks about the Galatians. Have you not seen Christ? Do you not remember? You have seen Christ as well. But the Galatians were later converts, years later, and Galatia's a very long way from Jerusalem. So what is going on here? And when he says, but also by apostles in Asia, appointed bishop of the church in Smyrna. So he's talking about Polycarp, who I also saw in my early youth. Now, is he talking about these apostles who he also saw in his early youth? I think it can be read both ways here. And that's all he relates. This link between John and Polycarp. And I think Papias does the same thing. I think he tries to link Polycarp with John, but which John? It's not clear. And this is decades and decades after the time of Christ, if we take that to be around 30. It's all a bit of a mess, though. It's quite interesting. I think that Irenaeus here clearly seems to be alluding to Jesus having been about 50 when he died. He's one of the best sources for Christianity in early times. Before him, we only have Justin Martyr, Papias, Hegesippus. Papias is not treated very nicely by other Christians, and Eusebius himself, as I think I've been through, says that he was a man of little knowledge when it comes to this, and he talked a lot about weird mystical stuff, which I've been through in my work on Papias, and it's since been augmented, so I'm probably going to do that video again. Anyway, the apostolic succession is something that I really will hammer home here. I've been writing on it for quite a while, and it's fairly tortured. It is fragmented. A lot of it is internally contradictory if you look at what church fathers often say. I'm going to leave that there. I thought that was quite interesting just to go through. John Remsburg's book is pretty good. I noticed actually he puts more weight on this link between Polycarp and John, but it's not really, it's only mentioned in a tiny little passage, and it's really, what is he saying? is he saying that John here, who is not mentioned in this passage in 3:3-4 against heresies, only that there's a link between the place and apostles, and that these apostles, it's inferred that this is John, actually talked to Polycarp. Irenaeus. Polycarp through Irenaeus. Irenaeus says, who I saw in my early youth. That's all he says, right? Apostles, possibly or possibly John. What's going on, man? It's not a very good way to establish a proper history. It's very fragmentary and frankly vague. Anyway, I'm going to leave that there. Thank you very much. I hope you have a good day. I'll be back tomorrow. Nice one. Bye.